are back, and we have the one and only Dr. Phil with us. This is Dr. Philip Agrios, and we are thrilled to have him on the show today. And I'm going to let Josh give us the quick introduction. Although there are so many things to say, we could make it very long, but for brevity's sake, this talented doctor is one of a kind. So Josh, tell us a little bit more.
That is great. Thanks, Janae. So Phil, welcome to the podcast. We're super excited to have you. For everybody listening, Dr. Phil is a self-sabotage specialist. Say that 5 times fast. He's a business consultant, a best-selling author, and an international speaker. And he has over 30 years of experience in empowering individuals to break free from patterns that hold them back. And so you can understand why we might be having Phil on to chat with us today. But he has developed a very unique approach to overcoming the self-sabotaging traits that everybody carries. So I want to talk with Phil. Phil, welcome to the podcast. We want to hear your story behind your T-NOW method and what brought you from your background in medicine and chiropractics into your world of releasing people from what's holding them back.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for taking this time to let me explain my story and what I have been cooking up for the last 30 years. So yes, I used to be a chiropractor. I used to be board certified in sports medicine. I was a doc for the United States powerlifting team and a local and national teams. And I was also a functional medicine practitioner. My specialty was thyroid and autoimmune disease. And during the process of trying to figure out what was going on with me, why I was getting to where I would get successful and then not be successful, and why my kids were the same way, or why I went through the things that I went through and my patients, and came across a particular trait that stops our success. And I called it the inborn sabotaging trait. Sabotage is, I love the original meaning of words. The original meaning of sabotage is French. And they used it in the late 1890s, where factory workers would use sabotage, clanky, because peasants used to walk in wooden shoes, so they were kind of clumsy and very cautious and, all over the place. So they used that word saboteur as in not undermining, but actually shaking things up to get the attention of the factory owners. And when I realized that, I was like, you know what, that's exactly what this trait is doing. It's not undermining our success. It's actually self-protection. It's protecting, it's shaking things up. It's waking us up going, there's something not going well here that I want you to have your attention focused on. So when I found it first, I was like, this is too simple. There's no way. There's freaking no way. So I'm from Jersey. I'm like, okay, I got to figure this out. My reputation is really important to me. So I went out to try to disprove it. And over 30 years researching thousands of people, not only was I able to prove it, I found a way to switch it off instantly, and it works 100% of the time. And like I said, in Jersey, you just can't say that. You got to prove it. And when I went out to prove it, to this day, no one's ever disproven that when you use this T-NOW method, specifically what we call the antidote, you cannot, 100% cannot self-sabotage yourself. It's impossible.
That's amazing. What was your sort of aha moment there, right? So what really led you to this? What was that moment like when you realized what this was?
Well, when I realized that I was able to discover a 6-step blueprint that nature uses to come back from her storms. And I realized these 6 steps were the same 6 steps that we use to solve any business or personal problem. And during the process, I was able to look at the opposite steps. And when I put them together, it actually created 3 basic principles of the universe, and called them the director principle, the supplier principle, and the communicator principle, because that's all atoms and galaxies, as including us, do, is we direct, communicate, and supply. That's it. And I realized that I had to teach myself quantum physics and everything else, and I dive into all these different things, and I use my knowledge of the body and medicine. And I realized that we have those same 3 principles, and I just call them the 3 traits. And when I realized those 3 traits within us is what allowed us to be who we are. Once you take those 3 traits, and I place them in a sequence called the protective sequence, and it has 3 steps. So the top step is what we call the dominant trait, or your superpower. This is the reason why you're here on earth, right? This is your purpose. And then there's a media bridge between the superpower and what we call the inborn sabotaging trait, or the saboteur. And I realized they worked like this, as a seesaw. And then realized there's only 6 sequences of human behavior, so there's really only 6 people in the world. So when I started treating patients and looking at this and helping them through, I realized that I was saying the same thing to certain people as I did with others, and it started to really realize, oh my God, I got something here that's so powerful. But back then, in the early 90s, it was just something I was thinking about, but it took me 30 years to really perfect it, because there is nothing like this in the world, so I had nothing to go by.
That's
Wow,
amazing.
that's quite a story, and quite the claim, too, that you can stop with 100% guarantee that accuracy of sabotaging. Because I find self-sabotaging is probably the #1 preventer of all of our, desired success and the things that prevent the outcomes that we really want. So this is, I want to say this is sounds like the secret to life, and we might just have it right here.
Well, that's the cool thing about it is that my clients who've taken this course are realizing there's only one thing to focus on for the rest of their life, just this one trait. And like I said, for 30 years, I kept on saying, this can't be this simple. There's got to be a way that this doesn't work. And the reason why is because I actually found a law. Because I said, what's the only thing that works 100% of the time? It's a law. And that's what I found. That's was my first book I wrote, called Life's One Law. Kind of goes into the 6 steps and everything else. Working on my second one to really focus on the saboteur. But that's where my programs are all focusing on the saboteur, not the 6 steps. But yeah, it's still amazing where I'll still see people, whether it's old patients or my loved ones or whomever, and they're going through something, and I go, it's your saboteur. And they're like, damn, yeah, you're right. So just use your antidote. And then they would use their antidote, and then we would help them through it. And it worked all the time. So yeah, it's still to this day.
That's amazing. So take us a little bit deeper into that discovery process when you're noticing these self-sabotaging behaviors in yourself, and maybe if you could share with us a little bit about what those were and how you use this to overcome those. We'll get real personal.
I was the king of self-sabotage, okay? So when I looked back, I kind of really all started downhill when I had a multidisciplinary clinic. I had medical doctors and all into this whole thing. And I was falsely accused of insurance fraud. And 3 things were going to happen. I was going to jail for fraud. I was losing my license, and I'm going to have to pay back 3 times of what the insurance companies paid me. Of course, the one insurance company that went after me, the other ones jumped on. And what's really cool was, and I say cool, is that the lawyer for that insurance company was the mayor of the next town. So I heard that he wanted to go after me to help him. Like, this is great.
Right.
But during that process, my father had developed brain cancer, 71-year-old healthy guy. Within 7 months, he passed. During that time, I became the primary healthcare provider of my mom. I also became disabled. I had a thing called thoracic outlet syndrome and carpal tunnel in both hands. And as a chiropractor, I couldn't work. And I used to get out of bed walking like I was walking on glass. And I was in my late 30s. And I had to close my practice down because I couldn't practice anymore. Because after my dad passed and everything just started to fall apart. And I remember it was only 15 years into practice, it was in February of 2001, I think it was, closing the door for the last time, walking away from a 3,000 square foot clinic and going, now what? And then during that process, other things were happening. My ex and I went through a horrific divorce. One of my daughters almost committed suicide. I went through financial ruin many a times. And I can keep on going, but I won't bore your audience. So every time I was going through all this, I'm sorry?
This sounds like a hurricane of a life. And it sounds like there's so many things that you could justify why things aren't working out for you.
Right. And I kept on saying, okay, I wonder what else I'm going to discover. Because I found that every time I was going through something, something more deeper inside of me was being ripped out and opening up, right? So you can look at, when life is falling apart, it's really falling together. It depends on what side you want to look at, right? If you are evolving, you have to dissolve. And if you dissolve, you have to evolve. They both happen at the exact same time, right?
Such a
So if
powerful
you're
perspective.
freezing up in the northern hemisphere and you're like, well, I have to wait for another few months. No, just go to the southern hemisphere. So we have a northern and a hemisphere. Everything is within us. It's up to you what you want to tap into to show yourself in the world. So I hear people go, I lost my confidence. I said, no, you didn't lose your confidence. You're just using the other side. And they look at me and say, it's there. So your saboteur is feeling that you are losing confidence. But when you use your antidote, you can start immediately feeling confident instantaneously. So when people realize that there's nothing that they lack, like lack of money is only matching the vibration of where you are. You have to have lack of money to stay in the state in which you are, right? So if money comes in, two things are happening. It gets you out of the state, but then it'll throw you right back in because you didn't handle the reason why, because you let something else externally outside of you to change you. Or you changed within you and then the money came in, or clients or whatever, and you started to heal and feel better on that end of it. So
I think it's really interesting, right? So I've done a lot of research and reading and self-development over the last 10 years or so, and this makes me think of a lot of Carl Jung's work with shadow self and sort of integration, right? And the fact that each one of us, and by the way, we're going to pull all this together in a minute, just in case everybody's wondering. But we are balanced individuals, right? In order to be in the universe, there is always a tension between good and evil, right and wrong, all kinds of different parts of our personalities, right? And part of what is so important if we want to be able to sustain change, and I'm sure, Phil, you'll talk, a little bit about how this plays in, is being able to recognize that, right? And being able to pull on those parts of yourself that are, I'll just be super vulnerable, right? Like I have stuff from when I was like 12, and I had this really traumatic experience of talking about Casey at the Bat. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's like an old-timey, old-school poem that I had practiced for like months to do in front of the whole school. And I was like 12, and I got up and I forgot after like 2 lines. I forgot it, and I ran through the whole audience of the school. Right, and this thing I didn't realize until recently that this really has affected and has sabotaged a lot of what I have done. And so there are a lot of those things that are in our shadow selves that are important for us as we get older to understand, and they will sabotage a lot of things. It'll relationships, how we are, really intentional about our health or our diet or the way that we're going to live. So I say all of this just to say that I'm totally with you there, right? And there are a lot of very sound principles in what you're talking about that are tied in with decades and decades and decades of sound psychological research and literature. So.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, for being vulnerable for that. Vulnerability creates credibility, right? So thank you so much for opening up to that. And just to make sure everybody understands, I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. However, I don't go back into the past, okay? People will bring it up and we'll show them that what happened to you is still happening now.
That's right.
Because when that situation happens in front of you, it represents all the thousands of other things that happen to you that are very similar. But what happens is that one thing that's in front of you, or the thousands, is your saboteur. And once you can relate, this is how and why this happened, and this happened in my past, and why it's still happening here. Now I can see in the past, I did kind of use my antidote, and that's how I was able to get through some of it. But because I didn't know my antidote, I couldn't sustain it, So I go back into being self-protective because I wasn't confident or whatever the case may be. We've had PTSD veterans take the course, and one was really, really cool. The first one I ever had took our course, and I said the first week, I said, take your antidote and bring it to your therapist. Brought it to his therapist. Within 3 to 4 weeks, major breakthroughs. Found out why he went to war at 5 years old, and he was just blown away, along with the therapist, of how specific and how quickly it got to the subconscious. Had another PTSD, brain injury, and all that, where he would just go off on things, and he had 2 opportunities to really have an episode. And by using his antidote, he was able to thwart them. And he's been in the program for about 6 months and seeing tremendous shifts. So, and we've seen people from, horrific narcissistic families where, one got amnesia and other things, and people come from molestations and all that, which I do not treat. Just letting everybody know there. But because they will see how the correlations, and by using the antidote in the present day, and then here's the key. If you ever want to neutralize anything that happened to you in the past, find the benefit. If you can
So what
find the
happened
benefit
for you?
out of that, there's no need to forgive anyone or yourself. Why would you want to forgive someone or ask for forgiveness or for yourself if you and the other person benefit from it? So it kind of releases that. And people ask me, well, why is that happening? I'm like, you're born with this sequence. This is what we found. You are born with this sequence. We see this in 2-year-olds, 1-year-old, whatever, even puppies. We can kind of show in that end of it. But it's the experiences that are trying to show. So, Josh, that moment, in my opinion, once you knew your saboteur, that experience was trying to help evolve you in a way to bring your antidote out, so for you to find it somehow so you can handle other situations. So I don't know if that resonates.
Absolutely. The unfortunate part about it is it took me 30 years to figure that out, right? Like that's...
Or the fortunate part, because now you gained all that information to help yourself and others now, right? So,
That's right.
right. There's always a benefit, there's a detriment,
Yeah.
and there's just an is, right? It depends on how you want to look at it. And I just always look for the benefit of how it's impacting me and others.
That's
Now,
so important.
The old me?
That's-
No.
Yeah, right. But that's important to pull on. I want to pull on that thread for a second, right? Because when Janae and I are coaching folks around, their health trajectory and how they're aging, I mean, we're looking to set people up to age well into their 80s, 90s to 100, right? And so there is a mind shift. There is a complete change. And if we talk about how healthcare works in general, and pharmaceuticals and the because you were a practicing physician, getting compliance and getting people on board with habit change is some of the most difficult stuff imaginable, right? Getting somebody to shift their patterns. So how does identifying that saboteur help accelerate and lock in folks who are looking to change habits, whether that's changing their diet, whether that's being regular with exercise? I mean, I'm trying to make a little bit of a bridge here, but...
Sure, absolutely. So this is one of the things that was why I had very high success rates with autoimmune patients, which is unheard of, right? What I found was people will come to me and go, hey, you're going to kill me. I'm like, what you do now? Because I had a pizza. I said, okay, how do you feel? I've been in pain for 4 days. It's like, great, I'm glad you're in pain. And it kind of reinforces that. But I'm more curious is that what happened that was more painful to deal with than the 4 days of pizza on a subconscious level? And what we found was that when they had that trigger, their saboteur came in, which will then cause them to go to their numbing agents, smoking, eating, drinking, whatever. Then when we used the antidote, the T-NOW method, 2 things happened. They lessened their numbing agents or they stopped them. And I was like, whoa. I remember one time before we have a digital workbook and all that, I had people actually fill out the workbook. And I had a Parkinson's patient, he was filling it out, and he got to an uncomfortable situation, and all of a sudden his jaw and his hand, his opposite hand, were starting to shake. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Afterwards, I said, did you notice anything? He goes, yeah. when I hit my saboteur and understood it, I started to shake. I said, can you understand? That's the stress that is a representation of the things that are happening to you, that your saboteur kicks in and causes an inflammatory or some type of reaction causing this that end of it. And when he used his antidote, his episodes actually lessened, or they were not as severe, or they stopped faster than they were, because he now knew how to start calming down and shifting it off. If I may, another, since you asked this question, I had a lupus patient who was doing great, but she would go home and bicker with her husband. And she says, every time I go home and bicker with my husband, I have my flare-ups. So for those of you with autoimmune, they have flare-ups, okay? So I said, okay, get him and you into the office. Explain to him what her sequence is. She understood his sequence. They understood each other. And then when they would go home, when they started to bicker, they would now know how to use their antidote, the T-NOW method, to offset it. And her flare-ups dropped tremendously, because then they understood why the other person was triggering them, and they could offset the conflict very quickly. So yes, it was very important back then, because I would have patients come from radio hosts and stuff like that who are very well known, and go, look, I'm going to this guy, this isn't working. And I look at it and go, I do the same thing. I tweak here and here, but you're stressed out of your gourd. I said, if you don't deal with this is never going to work. And then when they started using the program, because no one would ever come to me without using this program. If they were not going to doing this, I wasn't seeing them as a patient. And we saw those programs that didn't work now started to work, because they were messing it up through their stress.
Wow. And it's so interesting in that example, because I think it's really difficult to really take accountability in how other people affect us in those saboteurs. So in your example, the couple would bicker and then she'd have a flare up. And that's really something to be aware of, but then also twofold, understanding, what energy and interactions we're creating with the people in our lives, but then also taking accountability for learning and knowing how those affect us. And this reminds me, when I moved into this house, one of my kids was still wetting the bed at, he was already in the double digits. And when we moved into this house, he just stopped wetting the bed finally. And I was like, oh, this is so great. And then he and I had, we lived here a month, and he's like, Mom, how long have we lived here? I was like, about a month. He's like, I haven't wet the bed for a month. And I was like, wow. A few days later, he and I got into an argument that really reflected kind of the energy of the old place we came from. And then that night he wet the bed, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I realized my part in that, of how I was reacting to him, the level of impatience and anger that I had towards him, it felt so familiar and hadn't been present. And then the outcome was that stress was reignited in his life, and so for me to feel, and have understanding around that situation, I was like, oh, there's an emotional element to this. It's not just physical for him. It's not just the home. That it's part of the stress, and even the part I've played in, the interactions we've had that are stressful for him.
Oh, absolutely. See, once I know your sequence, the sequence I just told you about, I can tell you everything and never meet you. So if with you and Josh, okay, so if I never met Josh, I can ask you a couple of questions and tell you everything about Josh and never meet him, and tell you how you two interact and never ask a question. So we've seen parents and teenagers, this actually works on teenagers, right? When they go through teenageitis, I call it teenageitis. So when they go through that, imagine knowing your child's sequence, knowing exactly what they're going through on a subconscious level, and then using their subconscious words to help offset them. It's amazing. It shifts. That's how I was. My two daughters, and I have 7 grandchildren. I have 4 other stepchildren. So we have a pretty big family that I experimented on.
You're telling me with my 13-year-old who loves to just be. You're telling me with my 13-year-old who just loves to be defiant just because he thinks it's funny. You can help me.
Oh, absolutely.
Deal with that in a way that's positive, because it's like he just wants to be defiant because he thinks it's funny to say no to everything I say, even though he's actually going to do it. And I have to realize he's saying no because he's just trying to get a reaction.
Right. Yeah, so he has that sequence because he's in protection at that moment. Even if he's busting your chops, he's still in protection because he's not balanced. See, when you're resistive or you feel stressed or you feel anything other than the flow, your saboteur is in there protecting you. When you start to release your personal professional power and you hit that wall, that saboteur kicks in to protect you. There is nothing wrong with you. You're not an idiot or 100 of the words we say ourselves. Your kid is not a pain in the ass and everything else that we say, or they're a loser or whatever the case may be, right? And then we force them to do something because we're trying to protect them in a really weird way because that's how we were. For instance, I had a manager take my workshop, and he came up to me and goes, I love this. This makes so much sense to me, but my kid's always upstairs playing video games. I can't get him downstairs to interact with the family.
That's a common problem.
I'm sorry?
That's a common problem with teenagers.
So I asked him a couple of questions. We ascertained his son's sequence. Within less than a week, his son was downstairs interacting with the family, and in 2 months, their relationship skyrocketed because he realized he was the one pushing his son back in the room. He was making fun of him and all that because that's how he grew up. Once he understood what to do with his son, things shifted. And then he realized his business, he was doing the same thing because your inborn sabotaging trait and antidote are within you that affects your personal and your professional life, which are one. So when you are using it in your professional life, it is already at the same time using it in your business and your professional life. Once he realized that, his business started to grow because he started to shift as well. So, yeah, I mean, I can tell you stories. I had a kid one time said to his mother, "Who are you? Why aren't you yelling at me anymore? I don't understand."
Wow.
So, and then, I can tell you stories about that. But yeah, because once you understand another person's sequence, whether it's your business partner, and so those of you who are sales professionals, imagine knowing the sequence of someone who you're trying to close a deal. You'll know exactly what the resistive is, and then you can guide them to your product and service if your product and service is right for them. Let's stay in integrity, right? So in that end, or why my business partner, we've saved marriages, especially when the marriages are having that conflict, and then you have children involved too. But now you know the whole dynamic of everybody, and now they can see. I had one woman, she was screaming, get up, get up. The kid would never get up in the morning. I know his sequence. I was like, he's not going to respond to that. You need to do this, this, and this. And she would do, and he would respond better. Was it instantaneous? Of course not. You got a pattern that's there, and he's a teenager, okay? But certain things that we're doing and helping, she was focusing on his subconscious words, but she first has to focus on her words. She has to stabilize and balance herself first, and then use it on her child, which then causes the dynamic to become like this compared to like that.
Yeah. And one of the things that we really focus on is how all of these elements and aspects contribute to, a healthier, longer, more fulfilled life. So if you never figure this out and you continue to repeat these patterns, I like to say, if you don't learn, you're doomed to repeat from every experience you have. And like you said, you'll have an experience, and if you don't learn the lesson, you just redo the experience. You'll just have different players, different time, different people, but playing the same role essentially many times, right? So what would be the consequences of never gaining this type of understanding, especially how it relates to longevity and living a full life?
So cortisol, right? Cortisol is everything in our body. People say, well, cortisol is a bad thing. No, we need it when we're in a fight or flight situation, right? But with the cortisol being high and doing that, it causes damage. It causes more visceral fat, which becomes its own organ and causes hormone imbalance and dysregulation, right? It will cause the menopause. A lot of times with menopause, when the ovaries are shutting down progesterone and estrogen, the adrenals kick in to help with that estrogen and progesterone. And that's why a lot of women, I've had women go, don't tell my friends, but I never went through a menopausal symptom because they were not stressed out of the gourd because their adrenals were fine and things like that, right? And they handled life in a much different way. Again, that in some cases, don't someone say, I still have and I have no stress. So this is in some of the cases. But
Yeah.
when you don't deal with that, you change that energy. Your whole body causes an inflammatory reaction. Inflammation is the reason for chronic illness. It creates neurodegeneration, which is brain death, to cancers, to diabetes, to arthritis, to autoimmune, and there's like 7 major ones. I haven't talked about this in a long time. But again, it's an inflammatory reaction, just like the one with lupus, right? When you go into that stress, your body creates that inflammation. So by understanding how you can control, see, here's the thing. This is not where you get rid of the saboteur. You can never get rid of it, nor do you want to, because it's your protection. It's just like,
Right.
with your thyroid goes up and then the hypothalamus comes in and kind of regulates it, right? Do you want to get rid of that? Absolutely not. So you just need to learn how to dance with it more effectively, right? It's expanding and contracting in a rhythmic way, like your heart. Would you ever say, my heart, I just want my heart to expand? Not a good idea. You'll be dead. I just want things to contract. You'd be dead. So in your business and your life, you think, those of you here, if you think your life is supposed to be great and everything should work out, you don't know why you're here. You're here for the contrast. You're here for the adversity. And the saboteur that we found out is that it brings the adversity in order for you to evolve. So when you are resistive or stressed or freaking out, you're ready to evolve. Get excited.
It's such a vulnerable thing in general, right? To face. I don't know if you've read any of Jordan Peterson's books. Who, he's a pretty controversial guy now. Unfortunately, he's a classical liberal, but then made some statements. So whatever. I guess somebody will watch this or listen to this and judge. But too bad. So in one of his books, he talks about how each of us needs to understand that we have like a violent side, or like men should understand that they have the capability to be violent, so that they understand what we're capable of, so that you can choose to be peaceful. I'm probably butchering that in a horrible, horrible way. But the idea is very similar, Phil, right? Which is, we need to have that push and pull. That's an extreme example, and I'm not suggesting that I am a Jordan Peterson aficionado, but I have just read this recently. But it really highlights the idea that between what we have in our personalities, right? We have these split parts of us, whether there's something that we're active in now, or it's something that from when I was 12, or whatever it is, right? That we sort of have to acknowledge and like revere that exists. And it's not about putting it in a box and tying it up and putting it under the bed, right? It's about acknowledging that it exists, and that it can be, right, something of a benefit if we're being chased by a tiger or whatever it is, and it's still there. So I love that idea, because it is a way for us to honor what is part of us, because you can't cut those pieces out. Right?
You don't want to.
No, you don't. You don't. And that is part of being a whole person. And so as I'm coaching folks on trying to get their shit together, right, so that they don't have to spend all of their wealth on regaining their health in 20 years. And I was actually talking to someone earlier in the week, a CEO in the Midwest, and he was an older gentleman, and he was talking about how he knows that it is just so difficult to be able to initiate change, right? How can you possibly initiate change? And I talked him through some of the things that are sort of precursors to what you have in your T-NOW method, right? Which is trying to acknowledge what those barriers are and honor those as a way to help move forward. But that could be difficult for a lot of folks, and I think it's really helpful to be able to have a framework like you've put together that can help guide folks through being able to like identify, acknowledge, and then bring with them, right? How does that come with them? So after you help folks get this, identify what that saboteur is, how do you help them? I don't want to say cope. Cope's the wrong word, but how do you help them put together an action plan? What is that action plan then for sort of integrating that newfound knowledge into their life?
So that's a good question about the coping, right? Coping can be good, coping can be bad, right? Or it just is. So The analogy I give is that you ever see the domino masters, right? They set this whole elaborate thing up and they push this one domino, it goes, right? And let's say the last thing you see is balloons, right? Right? So that's the last, what do you see? The last thing, right? That balloon is your imposter syndrome, your anxiety, your overeating, your overthinking, your overtalking, you're emotional, you're going into the closet of, getting away from everything. It's everything you see last. So what do? We take our coping methods and do what? We put them on the balloons, not the one domino. So what's easier, hold down the balloons and stop pushing the damn domino. That domino is your inborn sabotage trait that creates every negative emotion that you experience. Every one of them, we prove that. So what do? When you push it, you go down the road of frustration and desperation. But when you use the antidote, the exact opposite to the saboteur, you have to go into growth, inspiration, and motivation instantly, 100%. Never fails. It's impossible to self-sabotage yourself.
That's great.
So if somebody,
I know it
is
sounds
doing-
like people are like, it can't be. Trust me, I've been trying to disprove it for over 30 years, and it just happened. I was talking to my daughter yesterday, and she was doing great, and she's done really well, but she just want to give me my gray hair anyway. And she just has this one little, and we started talking, and I asked her, we just launched a membership about a couple of weeks, and I asked her and my son-in-law to watch it and see where the millennial thought process was. And she really enjoyed it. It was a good refresher for her. And then I started saying, can you understand how your superpower is causing this and this, and how and she's like, I see it now. I said, it's just this one thing, and something happened in the past to her. And I said, look, this is what's still there that you still thought 10, 20 years you didn't want it has nothing to do with it. You dealt with it. No, you didn't deal with it because it keeps on showing up in this manner. These other people are coming in that are pissing you off because it's trying to get your attention. So let's be thankful for these people that are showing up that are pissing you off, because the person you can't stand is a part of you can't stand. They're just showing up to show you, right? So as she started seeing it, she started feeling better. And is she going to instantly do it? Absolutely not. I don't care. You go in the corner, suck your thumb with a pillow in a fetal position. I'm good with that. And people are like, what do you mean you're good with that? I am. That's just how you protect yourself. The question is how long are you there for? Mm-hmm. So if you're using your saboteur to protect yourself, I'm good with that. If you go eat a handful of M&Ms, okay, I'm good with that. The question is, are you going to keep on going, or are you going to do it every day? Right? Give yourself some grace. It's okay. And go, okay, what was the trigger that went to that M&Ms, or went to that violence, or I went to this and this and this? And just go, cool. That's really cool. That's interesting. It neutralizes it, and go, okay, what can I do better? Sometimes I have a phrase, and this may help people, because all the stuff I went through. Once in a while, I'll think of certain things, and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? And I just stop, and I go, I love you, man. And I love you, man, immediately tells me it was in the past. It was a benefit for me. It's okay. Do we need to deal with this, or it was just a passing thing? So immediately, those are the things people need to come up with. What can I do to love myself and be okay with it, and then try to deal with it?
That's
and
helpful.
this-
So helpful.
Yeah. This brings up another really good point in that, a lot of times I can make these awareness connections. One of the things I don't think I'm as good at is coming up with ways to, learn from them. Like Josh was saying, cope with them. Like, for example, with my son, it's like, oh, I just need to stop yelling at him. Why can't I stop yelling at him? So it's like I see the connection with how that affects him and how it affects me and our energy together. But then I put it on myself, like, I got to stop doing this. And that doesn't necessarily feel really helpful, because it's like I have to stop this when it's obviously a trigger for me. So how do you help people when it's like there's awareness around it, but it doesn't feel easy to just stop doing something?
May I ask you to be a little vulnerable? Any questions?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
absolutely.
When you were a kid or a teenager, were you more about being scattered all over the place? Were you more about pleasing others, or more about staying inward and kind of hanging out with yourself?
I definitely loved to spend time by myself. I would lock myself in my room for hours, and I would just clean up everything, and I would put on outfits and sing in front of the mirror. And I just really valued that time alone where I could just really feel like I could be myself. So that's, you know, as a teenager, that was my homeostasis.
That was your go-to. Right.
Yeah.
And you're very structured, right? Very in the box, like don't color outside my lines, I'll kill you, type of thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that you think you know everything, and you really do because you do your homework, but there are times when you don't because you created a story about yourself. So is it sometimes with your son that you're expecting him to be in this situation because in your mind it's easy. He should be doing this, this, and this. I ruled it out, right? And then when he doesn't, and he wants an answer, and you can't verbally express it, you overprocess things, and you got to kind of disconnect to try to figure that out. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm shocked because in my mind it's like, oh, this is so simple.
Yeah.
You know, logically, this is what should happen after this happens, or you say this, or you do this, because in my mind that works. What I don't realize is, you know, he's a young kid. He's learning all this for the first time.
I used to say to myself, you know, they're only been on this earth for 5 years, and I'm expecting and I'm on this earth for like, what, it was like 50 something back then, you know, and I still don't have my crap together, right? We forget that, right? But that's your sequence. So what happens is you overprocess things. You have a hard time. You need time. You can't express yourself. You can write a long email or a text, and because you can take time to do this, right?
Absolutely.
But because verbally at that moment you can't express yourself, you get focused. So you focus on your thoughts and your structure. And if it's not, when it doesn't that way, that you can micromanage, and you can get to the point of getting into the point of trying to control them, right? And then therefore there's the resistance, and that's your son is trying to, on a subconscious level, disarm your superpower.
That makes
Does
sense.
that resonate?
Yeah, it does.
So
And,
I already
you
know
know,
your
that's-
sequence. So now I know exactly what you do, how you do with your son. And then we can go to the extreme, and we can go to in your business and all that. And you may not confront people as much. You may be more quiet. You may not verbalize your brilliance, right? And maybe Josh is like, Janae, will you please speak up? Because you got some great ideas, and you're kind of like, you know, it's a little self-degrading, self-talk and all that. I don't know. Is that correct?
Yeah, sometimes. And on that note, because I have struggled with those things, I've really worked to not speak that way, to have more courage to do those things. But it's felt like a hard process. Like it takes a lot of energy. It's like, oh, okay, I know I have to have this really hard conversation. The first time I was like, I put it off for weeks. You know, the second time I had to have a conversation, I put off for a week. The next time it's like, I don't want to put this off because that's just torture. So I just went into it, you know? So it's like, okay, I'm making progress, but it feels so slow.
Right, because that's comfortable for you. So here's the thing. You do not, have you taken mindset courses and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've taken a lot of that type of
You don't
thing.
need mindset.
Okay.
You need heart set.
Yeah.
You need to
would
come from your
agree.
heart. See, here's the thing. One saboteur deals with the brain and the mind. The other one deals with the gut, and the other one deals with the heart. 2/3 of the population does not need mindset. One needs
Interesting.
feel set, well, one needs heart set. You need to come from your heart because you plan first and overthink, and then you'll initiate. But there are times when you have a hard time initiating, motivating yourself, getting things moving because of the thoughts that are stopping you. Is that correct?
Yes. And, you know, if I use my heart, that means I have to acknowledge my feelings. I mean, that's a hard thing to do.
Well, your
I don't
feelings
always
are
want to do that.
your feelings is your bridge. See, emotions and feelings are not the same.
Yeah.
What I discovered
yeah.
that each of the principles govern each differently. So your thoughts are governed by one, your emotions by the other, and your feelings are the other. Because I will never know how you feel, but through the physical emotion and my perception of what that particular expression means, that I come up with what I think you're feeling. I will never know what you're feeling, right?
So,
that's
help me dissect those two. So
sure. So let's say my mom.
Yeah, go
See,
ahead.
one thing with my mom was she used to look like this when she was mad.
Okay.
So when people used to do this, I would think they're mad at me. Until one time I was like, why are you mad? I'm just concentrating. Right? So that physical expression meant something to me that I thought that person's feeling was the one that way. But as soon as I asked questions and changed the perception of gave myself new knowledge, now I have two opportunities, but I don't know which one. So by actually asking, how are you feeling? And then I can get that expression from that. But our emotions express and emote our feelings.
Okay.
So what happens is your emotions, you don't emote as well because it's really uncomfortable for you in that area. Confronting, fear of, you don't want to feel stupid. You don't want to feel embarrassed. So you pull back until you feel it's 100% cool and then you move forward. Now, I've never asked you any of this, right? I don't, right? So in this few, just talking to you, have I gotten a good expect of what's going on with you?
Yeah, I definitely
That's how
think
quick
those
this can happen.
Yeah, those are probably my highest, triggering points that you've touched on that I've really tried to do work on, which is why this work is so intriguing to me because, I do feel like I've done a lot of work on myself, but I couldn't say with, 100% accuracy, I've been able to overcome these things. So, if somebody like me who's, done a lot of work, but still feels like, oh, when I'm hearing you talking, I feel very connected to ways that I'm still self-sabotaging, and I have awareness around some of them. I probably don't have awareness around other. When you talk about feelings and emotions, one of the maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, one of the emotions I have a lot is anger, if you can call that an emotion. But the feeling I might actually be having is sadness, but it expresses as anger. Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah.
Okay.
So your anger is expressing your sadness, but gets misinterpreted.
But I don't want to acknowledge the sadness because anger is a higher energy level and it fuels me because I like to move forward and keep going. If I give into the sadness, then I would just want to sit there. And in my mind, I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense and it doesn't get anything done. Right.
Right. Because the anger triggers your superpower of your mind and the sadness kicks into the heart and you have a hard time with that end of it.
Yes.
So
So if I were to go, go ahead.
So I'm going to give you a reason why, because I don't want you to feel bad about this at all, or anybody else listening to this. I took the greats, Robin, Rowe, Zig, I had all their cassette tape programs. Right? That's how far back I'm going.
I love that. The cassette tapes. I still have a couple binders of those.
Exactly. So what was happening was, what I realized during this whole process of figuring this out, I was taking all that brilliant information and putting it on my superpower and my bridge. Because subconsciously it was easier to use it. But once in a while it would hit my antidote and I would be successful. But because I didn't know what my antidote was, I couldn't sustain it. So then I would drop again. Now I know my antidote. And that's why the antidote is repeatable success. So again, when you're doing great and you hit that wall, as you contract, it's only one trait that's causing you to contract. And as soon as you know that trait and use that antidote, you immediately go into growth. So now you're doing this compared to doing this. So I don't want people to get a misunderstanding that once I do my antidote, I'm going to go like this.
Right.
I've seen people do that depending on the situation, right? But 99.9% of the time, you're doing this. So when you feel like I'm taking one step forward and I feel like three steps back, well, you're contracting for a reason. Had a doc one time. He went up $1.4 million in his practice, and 1 week he got on. He was like, practice isn't doing that great this week. And I went, really? You just 4 times your business, and you're having a contracting week. So let's look at why. Maybe it's a great time to see that because you expanded and got successful, looking at some of the cracks that might be there. And when he did, there were a few things that one staff member was overwhelmed and things like that. So you got to realize that experience is what it talks to you. See, God or higher power or your higher consciousness or whatever you believe in, right? Doesn't speak your language. It speaks experience. So when you have that experience, the question is why am I protecting myself at this moment? So I want your audience to write that down. Why am I protecting myself at this moment in time? Not why am I a jerk? Why can't I get through? Why can't I figure this task out? Why don't I let this person abuse me? Why can't I talk? Why can't I do this? Why can't I express all this thing? Why am I protecting myself at this moment in time? Right? Even if you don't know, just doing that, we've seen people help that shift by kind of shifting it. But then once you know your antidote, you know now my saboteur is protecting me. And now I can move forward with that, and depends on how much you're going to move forward. And also what's happening at that moment. What do you need? And by being surrendering, now surrendering is not losing. Surrendering is what? Opening up. It's being vulnerable. Just as Josh was, he was vulnerable in that situation, like a flower, right? A flower opens up.
Nobody's ever called me a flower before. That's a new one.
I like to consider myself.
That's good.
Like a
No, this
flower.
is good. It's whatever works.
I was thinking of something else and I just leave it alone. So as I opened up, right, as a flower opens up and there's no bee that comes and pollinates it that day, does the flower close up and go, you know what, I should have been red. I didn't like the blue when I first was born. I should have been red, or I should have been born over there. There's a lot of bees over there. No, it just keeps on opening up, trusting that it knows that as it is going, it will get pollinated. And then if it doesn't, then there's another purpose for it, whether it's to die and fertilize something else, but having enough that end of it.
I think it's super important just to highlight the mechanism here, right? So I'm an evidence-based guy, so I like to talk actual science, which sometimes Janae rolls her eyes at. But so, we all have the best supercomputer, right, ever created. And it learns so well and so fast and is so efficient that over time, it learns how to make certain connections and how to react to things. And so just like Phil talked about being primed with his mom and her, her squinty eyes or whatever being angry, your brain finds out real quick how to associate those things, and then it stops making it actually what it does is it makes unbelievable assumptions, right? And the more data that it gets in, the more assumptions that it makes. And so we come to a point, Janae, where that default mode network, which is sort of like it's the what am I thinking? It's like a train station. Whoever's managing a train station, right? So the default mode network is the manager of the train station, and it's directing people around because, well, if you start switching up where the trains are coming into which stations, it doesn't really get that message right away. And it will still direct people to the old stations because it just thinks that's where it is. And so it does take a lot of reprogramming, right, and of sort of doing that habit and building that habit for most people, like Phil said, to be able to understand that, oh, wait, the 529 to Jersey is now on the north track instead of the south track, right? So what's really cool to me is that's a very complicated process, and it is a process that most people don't do well. If you talk to psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, I mean, even Phil has many stories, if there is not a good framework, people don't do well. People will fail because it is hard. It is hard to face the vulnerability of making a mistake. It is hard, Janae, to face the vulnerability of being responsible. You being responsible for controlling that anger, that's a hard thing. That's now self-control, which is a whole other can of worms, right? So again, just kind of coming back, I love, Phil, that you have a framework for this that sort of takes the guesswork out, because we need to sort of just be doing and not be like, we do such a good job of getting in our own way. And I've coached enough people to be able to tell you that most people, including myself, are the best performers in getting in our own way. And so having
because
this
they're protecting themselves from you.
Absolutely.
On a subconscious level, you want me to do what? That brings, if I don't know how much time we have, but I can go over the 3 fundamental reasons why we self-sabotage that I found. I don't know if that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's close out with that. That'd be great.
Okay, so the first one is that I've had success before and I lost it. So if you ever get that success again, the pain of losing it is more painful, so we never get to that point. So a business owner who had $1 million and they lost it, so they never get to that point because they didn't manage money well. So subconsciously, why do I don't want to get this million? Because I'm going to have pain. Or someone who broke your heart, you never get to that point that want that love again, because if that person leaves or dies again or whatever, it's too painful. So we settle for somebody different than what we really need, or we push them away and don't even want anybody, and then now our business is our relationship, right? The second is sidestepping what needs to be done, right? You mean I have to listen to this podcast to you guys every week and all this stuff and learn something? I gotta read a book. I gotta go out, take a course and all this. You know what? There's a great movie on Netflix. I'm gonna binge watch what it was like. There's only 8 seasons. I'll binge watch that. Once I'm done, then I'll go back and do what I got to do. That's never gonna happen. The third one is more success equals more pain. You guys ever had a really great month in revenue, and then the next one sucked?
Yep.
Right? Why? Because that success, you were not ready. You didn't maybe have the automations or staff, or you didn't have things set up. So now in your mind, success means I can't see my kids, I can't work out, all this stuff. So therefore, you don't get to that point again. So again, it's you've had success and you've lost it, sidestepping what needs to be done. And then 3 is more success equals more pain.
Okay. And in your description of those, what if you see yourself in all 3 of them?
Then you know what? I don't know what to tell you. No, all 3 are due to your saboteur.
Okay.
It's just one thing that creates everything. When you have 14 things happening to you at one time, all because this one brought them in. And that's proven day in, day out.
Okay.
And that's what's
amazing.
So
yeah.
and so now, what can somebody expect going into the program that you offer? If they're somebody like me that, may or may not have anger issues, or may or may not see themselves in all 3 of those aspects, or, may or may not have done lots of work and has awareness, but doesn't really know how to, get through each one of them in a really effective way. What could somebody, going into your program expect through it? And then, who could they be at the end of that? Sure.
So we have 3 different ways. The third one is workshops and, going into corporations, stuff like that. But aside, just to the individual, we do have the premium coaching, and then we have our membership. So the membership is monthly. You get a little course, you get your inborn sabotage and trait and antidote, just that. You don't get the other 2 and all the other things that we go over.
But just doing that, I would be able to figure out what is my saboteur.
Yes, you would get that understanding. Would you go deeper and deeper with it? It all depends. And then once a week, I get on and send you 2 to 3 minute videos of how your saboteur is affecting the theme. Like the theme of last month was abundance. So how does your saboteur affect abundance, and how can your antidote offset it in your professional life? And then the other week is your health, and the other week is your relationships. The other one is our premium. So I always joke, if you have money and you breathe, does not mean you get in. I'm very protective. So what we do is we actually see if you're a candidate. So you have a conversation, about a 30-minute conversation, to see if this is really truly for you. And if that's the case, then you go into an hour consult, go even deeper, and we want to make sure 3 things you can do. Can you lease 5 times your investment? Is this really truly yours? And what can we guarantee you? I actually guarantee results. And we have a money back guarantee that if you feel this is not right for you, get 100% of your money back. Okay.
Wow.
And in there's 8 weeks of my training of all the things that I discovered, like you get the inborn sabotage and trait, then you understand how those coping methods deal with it, and the other 2. And then I actually found 2 base fears. There's 2 base fears that we're born with and how to offset them immediately. You get 1 subconscious word that stops all your goals. If you're a business owner, imagine knowing the inborn sabotage and trait and antidote of your business, and how you and your employees are actually self-sabotaging it. And I have a lot of coaches and authors that take this. Right. And imagine now understanding other people, learning how to do what I just did to you, especially sales professionals. We've had sales professionals go from 30% to 90% closing rates in a couple of weeks, because now they understood why their inborn sabotage and trait was stopping them from closing. So those are the main 2 things that people can come in at, depending on what their commitment is and what they can do.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. So Phil, tell us, do you have any speaking engagements or anything coming up, and where can folks find you online?
So they can do, LinkedIn, social media and all that. If they're interested, we have a waiting list now. We're probably opening up our membership in a couple of months. They can go to thenowmethod.com. That's thenowmethod.com. If they're interested in the if they're a business owner, executive, entrepreneur, or a career person who want to go from career to their business and they're having a hard time doing so, then they can go to tnowmasterclass.com. tnowmasterclass.com. It's a 12-minute video. They can have a discovery call with us, and then we can see if they're a candidate. And it's a conversation. I don't sell anybody. That 30-minute, you cannot buy anything from us if you even wanted to.
Great. I love it. I love it. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for analyzing Janae. Maybe we'll do a follow-up episode where I don't know.
I'll take the course
I've got some
and then
thoughts.
we'll do a follow-up. Yeah.
Yeah, what's really cool is,
I'm
we
ready.
can
I'm ready
actually
to
go
take it.
between the two of you and how you guys can, why you work so well again, and why once in a while you get under each other's skin.
Yeah, that would be really fun. I mean,
That's
I'm
that's
open
mainly
to
because
anything.
Janae can't get it. That's just mainly because Janae can't get a meeting on her calendar. That's mainly the reason that.
That's just the reason today, not the main reason, just for today.
That's funny.
That's great.
Yeah,
well, thank you
it's
so much.
It's been wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you
for
so
being
much.
on
It's been
here
an honor.
and really sharing your heart, because that really came through in the way that you teach this, and I appreciate that, because that's a level of authenticity that shows that you live what you teach, and that
you.
there's nothing more valuable than really being who you say you are.
Thank
to
you.
me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate
So
you
thank
very
you.
much, guys.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Becoming Young podcast. Quick reminder that this is not medical advice and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. If you're facing a healthcare concern, please consult your primary healthcare provider. We can't wait to see you next time, where we're going to talk about more ways to keep you looking and feeling young. Click through to watch some more videos.